Just hours after China sharply criticized the Hormuz blockade, a Chinese-linked tanker appears to have tested Trump's move by sailing through the strategic waterway. A US-sanctioned Chinese tanker crossed the Strait of Hormuz without being stopped, leaving Washington looking embarrassed at the very start of its blockade push. After an Iran-linked vessel made it through, Beijing can now point to a highly visible breach of the blockade, raising fresh questions about US maritime dominance. A Chinese tanker sanctioned by the United States sailed through the Strait of Hormuz on April 14th, marking a striking development amid the new maritime standoff in the Gulf. The vessel passed through Hormuz despite the US-imposed blockade, according to ship tracking data that showed it successfully made the transit out of the Gulf. Reuters made the claim about the vessel Starry, citing tracking data from LSEG, marine traffic, and CLR to document the ship's movement through the strategic waterway. According to the same data, the Starry would be the first ship to make it through the strait and exit the Gulf since the blockade began. Notably, both the tanker and its owner, Shanghai Xuanrun Shipping Company, Limited, are under US sanctions, making the passage especially politically sensitive. Reuters reported that sanctions on the Chinese-linked company were imposed because of its dealings with Iran, placing the vessel in the wider network of trade restrictions tied to Tehran. The Starry is a medium-range tanker carrying about 250,000 barrels of methanol, according to the shipping data cited in the reports. The vessel loaded that cargo at its last port of call in Hamriyah in the United Arab Emirates, adding another regional link to the ship's voyage. Reuters also reported that the Chinese-owned tanker has a Chinese crew on board, based on the available vessel data. An Iranian embassy statement described the Starry as a Malawi-flagged tanker, adding another detail to the growing attention around the ship's transit. Iranian embassy in Ghana wrote on X, and I quote, "Breaking, Starry, a Chinese oil tanker sanctioned for shipping Iranian oil, flying the flag of Malawi, a country with no coastline, just sailed through America's blockade of the Strait of Hormuz." The Navy, with its many big beautiful ships, issued repeated warnings. Reportedly, the tanker's captain upgraded to premium to skip the ads. Edit. We're being told the blockade only applies to countries the US isn't afraid of. That list used to be long. It now fits on Trump's McDonald's receipt, delivered by DoorDash. Unquote. Tensions in the Strait of Hormuz appeared to escalate on April 13th when the United States imposed a naval blockade targeting Iranian shipping, following the failure of prior diplomatic talks. Despite the newly enacted US blockade, an oil tanker successfully transited the Strait of Hormuz, according to reports from US military sources monitoring the waterway. The partially loaded oil tanker named Elpis managed to cross the strait on April 13th, as detailed in a CNN report covering the incident amid heightened restrictions. The Elpis vessel reportedly cleared the narrow waterway without incident, even as the US blockade was actively in place against Iranian-linked shipping traffic. The Elpis had been previously sanctioned by the United States due to its alleged connections to Iran's shadow oil trade network operating outside official channels. This transit occurred shortly after President Trump's announced blockade was set to begin, marking an early test of the enforcement measures in the strategic choke point. The development was reported by Iran International, which cited a CNN report confirming the tanker's passage through the restricted area. After the announcement of a US naval blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, China indicated that it aligns with Iran's position on the issue. Beijing also called on President Donald Trump to remain composed and exercise restraint following the collapse of recent talks with Iran. On April 13th, China's foreign ministry stated that maintaining safety and stability in the Strait of Hormuz should be treated as a priority. Chinese officials further emphasized that secure passage through the strait is essential to avoid disruptions affecting other nations and global trade. China also stated that it expects both the United States and Iran to adhere to the terms of the two-week ceasefire arrangement.
The Strait of Hormuz is an important route for international goods and energy trade. Safeguarding the security, stability, and unimpeded passage in the Strait of Hormuz serves the common interests of the international community. The root cause of the disrupted passage in the strait is the Iran conflict, and the solution is to achieve a ceasefire as soon as possible. All parties need to remain calm and exercise restraint. China will continue playing a positive and constructive role. The U.S.-Iran talks held in Pakistan are a step toward the de-escalation of the situation. China hopes that all relevant parties will follow the temporary ceasefire arrangement and stay committed to political and diplomatic channels in settling disputes, so as to avoid flare-ups of fighting again and create conditions for the early restoration of peace and tranquility in the Gulf region.
China has also rejected recent reports suggesting that it is supplying new air defense systems to Iran. Beijing described claims of any such weapons transfer as unfounded and characterized them as misleading. China's foreign ministry said, and I quote, "China has always adopted a prudent and responsible attitude towards military exports, implementing strict controls. In accordance with its own export control laws and regulations and its international obligations. We oppose unfounded smears or malicious associations." End quote.
$25 करोड़ गरीब गरीबी को परास्त करके बाहर निकले।
For the good of our nation, let's work together and let's truly make America great again.
The fastest news breaks.
Requested PM saying that we will have to speak to Putin and to Zelensky.
The biggest newsmakers.
The relationship with India is probably the most important bilateral relationship the U.S. will have for the rest of this century.
The capital delivered quite an election result today.
Expert analysis.
The million-dollar question today is how to stop this dance of death.
Ground reports.
I'm standing at the crossroad of the Kumbh Mela. Behind me are more than 100 entry ghats.
Long-form interviews.
Exclusionary politics is reflected in Manipur case as well. You don't bother because this is a small state.
Deep dive into burning issues.
It's often said DRC could be the richest country in the whole world. It's because of what sits underneath.
Why exactly did the US topple the Sheikh Hasina government?
HD videos. We don't just break news, we break it down.